creeps, and welcome to another episode of Grave Hunter. In this episode, we are going to figure out if you can catch a murderer by removing the eyeballs from the victim and seeing if the image of the murderer is seared into the retinas. Sounds insane, right? Well, it kind of is. But before we get into all of the details on that insane story, go ahead and like that subscribe button, or hit the subscribe button and hit the like button. And once you do that, I will reward you guys with a really good murder story somewhere in the episode. Did you do it?
Yes.
Awesome. On with the show.
All across the globe, cemeteries and historic buildings are disappearing. The histories and names of those buried there and who lived there are in threat of being lost forever. I am on a mission to tell their stories. This is Grave Hunter.
Oh, Portland, Seattle's weird sister to the south. Okay, that might sound a little biased, but Portland, or Stumptown as it used to be called, despite all of its weirdness, is a pretty cool city. Pioneers started settling in the area in the 1840s, having endured and hopefully survived the brutal Oregon Trail. Portland, renamed Portland in 1845, began its life as what some would call the filthiest city in the northern states, due to the crime, poor sewage, and overall debauchery of the town. Lucky for us, though, this city, separated by rivers and with one too many bridges, has a ton of great stories.
Welcome to Lone Fir Cemetery in the second coolest Northwest city, Portland, Oregon. Now, being a Seattle native, there's always been a little bit of a rivalry between Portland and Seattle. However, I might have to give it to Portland on this one because Lone Fir is a gorgeous piece of property if you happen to be dead. Now, here's the interesting thing. This cemetery has a multitude of graves. There's a ton of tragic stories, but naturally, there is one in particular that I desperately want to find and share with you guys. I am going to attempt to find the grave of French courtesan Anjin Tingri Lacose. Let's go. Did I mention this place is haunted by her? Well, it is.
The 30 acres that make up Lone Fir have been around since 1846, with the first recorded burial. In 1855, it became an official cemetery, and to this day, there are over 25,000 people buried here. It should be noted that in the southwest corner of the cemetery is a mass grave containing 130 inmates from the Oregon State Insane Asylum. However, if you're looking for a marker, you won't find one. This grave is unmarked, and the cemetery wants to keep it that way. Luckily, the woman we came here for has a marker, and I just found her.
So Anjin's life is really kind of tragic. She's born in 1850 in France. She immigrates over here with her parents around age 5 or 6 and somehow lands in Portland. Now, I don't know if her parents changed her name or if that was a personal choice when she was older, but she starts going by Emma. Whatever, who cares? Later in life, she ends up getting married to a wealthy man, and she's living the life here in Portland. That is, until he decides to leave her and run off to New York with a little, I don't want to call her a bitch, but you know what I'm saying. He runs away, it's horrible. So now, Emma, at this point, is left penniless and all alone here in Portland. And she decides, you know what, I'm French, I'm 35, I'm feeling spicy. I'm gonna be a prostitute. And she becomes one, a really wealthy one. And she's known for these elaborate parties she has. Everybody loves her, except things are going to take a really bad turn for her. December 22nd of 1885, a police officer, for whatever reason, is outside of her house around 11 at night. He hears screaming. He lets himself into her apartment, her cottage, whatever you want to call it, and he finds her bloody, mangled body on the floor. Now, this is where things get really upsetting. She's completely covered in blood, almost unrecognizable because she has 12 wounds from her head to her arms. She clearly put up a fight. The murder weapon was a hatchet.
Once leaving the scene of the crime, the police officer spots a man in the alley named William Sundstrom, who had scratches on his face that he claimed were from falling into a tree. Not believing him, surprise, the cop arrests him and goes to his house where he finds a bloody hatchet and bloody pants. For some unknown reason, the cops don't think this is enough evidence to convict him, and he walks free. In an attempt to find concrete, heavy air quotes there, evidence of a killer, they decide to try out optography. Optography was a common practice in the 19th and 20th centuries, where forensic teams believed that the last thing someone saw before death was recorded in an image preserved on the retina. Scientists had found what they believed to be proof of this theory by an image they believed to have recovered from the retina of a rabbit. But despite the hundreds of people who had their eyeballs removed after death, no killer was ever found due to the process, and the experiment slowly fell out of favor. This means that no one was ever caught for the murder of Anjin.
Now, the fact that her murder is still unsolved is possibly the reason why people say they still see her to this day. Now, what they see is a full-body apparition of An, and she screams when she sees people coming. So I don't know if she's just in this horrible, hellish loop of the night of her murder, having to relive it over and over and over again. I don't know. All I know is her life was cut way too short, and it's super tragic. So here's a fun fact about the cemetery. It was not originally called Lone Fir. It was originally sort of at one point called Mount Crawford. It was called Mount Crawford in honor of the second owner's partner, Crawford Dobbins, who died. Now, the two of them co-owned a steamboat called the Gazelle. Now, if you're familiar with Oregon history, you will know the name of that ship because that steamboat in the 1880s blew up in I think 24 people died. And the guy felt so guilty because his partner died and the steamship blew up that he named the cemetery Mount Crawford.
Steamboats. They really did have a way of blowing up, didn't they? The Gazelle, though? This story is nuts. It's April 8th of 1854, and the brand new steamship called the Gazelle is getting ready for their big first voyage to pick up goods and to take folks to Washington on the upper Willamette River in a small town called Kanawha. The luggage is being loaded, the people are getting on board, when all of a sudden the chief engineer, the man responsible for keeping the boilers running and the water levels right, Moses Toner, runs off of this boat. Less than a minute later, the boilers explode, sending bodies and fragments into the air. 20 people died. So what happened? Well, the lackluster investigation decided it must have been a technical error by Moses himself, something he would never pay for.
Now, you guys didn't think that Anjin was the only working lady in the cemetery, right? Now, keep in mind that Portland in the Victorian era was a place of crime, of Shanghaiing, and chaos. And so there was a lot of working ladies in this town. And this grave behind me used to be the grave of Alice Oberle, who died in 1884 from cirrhosis of the liver. Now, what makes this story kind of interesting is she's no longer buried here. So she was known as the woman that had 6,000 lovers, and those lovers were obviously very dismayed when she died, so they paid to erect this Celtic cross in the cemetery. This is the only Celtic cross in all of Lone Fir. It's beautiful, but there's no name, because when her sister found out that she was buried here and not a Catholic cemetery, she paid to have her disinterred moved to the Calvary Catholic Cemetery, and her name and the inscription are gone. So now this monument is all that's left of Alice in the cemetery. Now, I believe I promised you guys a murder story for liking the subscribe button and the like button. I don't know why I keep saying like and the subscribe button, but it's fine. So somewhere in the cemetery, I believe in an unmarked dual grave, lies James Johnson and Archie Brown, who in 1878 robbed a pawn shop, and then in pursuit to catch them, somebody got caught in the crossfire and died. For that, they were convicted and hung and buried together here. familiar with Portland history, you will know the term Shanghaiing, and what that basically refers to is the illegal practice of kidnapping crew members for ships, the largest port being Shanghai, hence the name. Well, this dude, James Turk, was a captain of one of those ships. He even kidnapped his own damn son. And if you're wondering, how did they illegally kidnap all of these grown men? Well, they did it by placing trap doors in bars, which the men would fall through, land in a cage in the underground tunnels of Portland. So next time you're having a micro brew, maybe take a look at where you're sitting. To be totally honest, I am just so happy to be grave hunting Northwest again. I have been so homesick, and even though I am currently in Portland and not in Seattle, I will be in Seattle later today, so watch out for next week's episode where I grave hunt my hometown of Seattle. Until next week, chin chin creeps. And just to be fair, this episode would not have been possible without my parents who helped me film this entire thing. Have a wave.